Welcome to my channel Quantum Soul. If you've ever been hijacked by your emotions, spiraling into anxiety, drowning in sadness, or exploding in anger, and felt completely powerless to stop it, there's a quantum discovery that will change everything. Scientists have found a sacred pause between every trigger and your reaction, where you have infinite power to choose. Most people miss this completely. Now, you might be wondering how this is possible, especially if you've tried willpower, positive thinking, or meditation without lasting results. Here's the thing. The problem isn't that you're weak or broken. It's that you've been trying to control your emotions instead of understanding the quantum mechanics of choice. Traditional approaches focus on managing the emotional storm after it's already started, which is why they fail. But what I'm going to show you today is completely different. I'm going to reveal the exact neuroscience behind this sacred pause, why most people miss it completely, plus the 5-step daily protocol that activates this choice point automatically so you can transform any emotional reaction in real time and literally author your reality through conscious response selections. There's a quantum space between every trigger and your emotional reaction that most people never even notice. Yet, it holds the key to transforming your entire emotional experience. This discovery isn't just theoretical. It's based on solid neuroscience that reveals something extraordinary about how your brain actually works. When something triggers you emotionally, whether it's anxiety creeping in before a big meeting, sadness washing over you after a difficult conversation, or anger flaring up when someone cuts you off in traffic, there's always a brief neurological gap between the stimulus hitting your brain and your emotional response kicking in. This isn't just wishful thinking or spiritual bypassing. It's measurable brain science. Your brain physically requires time to process incoming information. And in that tiny window, you have access to infinite possibilities for how you might respond. The challenge is that this gap happens so quickly, usually lasting only milliseconds to a few seconds, that most of us blow right past it without ever realizing it existed. What happens during those automatic emotional reactions feels so immediate that it seems like the trigger and your response are one continuous event. You see the email that stresses you out, and instantly you're flooded with anxiety. Someone says something hurtful and immediately you're drowning in sadness or exploding in anger. Your mind creates the illusion that these reactions are inevitable, that this particular trigger always leads to this specific emotional response, whether it's guilt, fear, frustration, or overwhelm. But here's what's actually happening in your nervous system. The trigger creates an electrical signal that travels to your amygdala, your brain's alarm center, which then sends chemical messages throughout your body. This process, even though it feels instantaneous, actually takes time and In that time, there's always a choice point available to you. From a quantum perspective, this pause between trigger and reaction is where infinite possibilities exist simultaneously, like waves of potential waiting to collapse into your experienced reality. Think of it like standing at a crossroads where dozens of paths stretch out before you, each leading to a completely different emotional landscape and life experience. In that sacred pause, you have access to responses that your automatic mind has never even considered. You could choose curiosity instead of anxiety, compassion instead of anger, or peaceful acceptance instead of overwhelming sadness. The quantum field doesn't judge which response you select. It simply reflects back the energy of whatever choice you make in that moment. Most people miss this choice point completely because they've never been taught to look for it, especially when they're caught in the grip of intense emotions. When anxiety is racing through your system or anger is burning in your chest, your awareness gets completely hijacked by the emotional storm. Your attention becomes so consumed by the feeling itself that you lose touch with the part of you that's capable of observing and choosing. It's like being so focused on the waves crashing around you that you forget you're actually standing on solid ground. The more intense the emotion, the more this choice point seems to disappear, even though it's always there, patiently waiting for you to remember it exists. The difference between emotional autopilot and conscious emotional selection is the difference between being a victim of your circumstances and being the author of your experience. When you're running on autopilot, your emotional responses are like a programmed playlist that plays the same songs over and over, regardless of whether they match the current moment or serve your highest good. But when you activate conscious emotional selection, you become like a skilled DJ who can read the room and choose exactly the right response to create the experience you want. You're no longer at the mercy of old patterns, reactions, and emotional habits that were formed years ago under completely different circumstances. Here's your first quantum hack that works for any emotion. The next time you feel triggered, whether it's anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, or any intense feeling, simply count to 3 before responding. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself, what would my highest self choose here? This simple pause works for every emotional state and immediately gives you access to responses you never knew you had. Once you understand this sacred pause exists for all emotions, the next question becomes, what does science say about our power to choose? 3 groundbreaking researchers have proven something that will completely change how you see your emotional reactions. And their discoveries reveal that your capacity for conscious choice isn't limited by how intense your emotions feel or how overwhelming your circumstances become. Dr. Viktor Frankl's groundbreaking research emerged from the most challenging laboratory imaginable, the concentration camps of World War II. In those conditions of unimaginable suffering, where every external freedom had been stripped away, he made a profound discovery that changed our understanding of human resilience forever. He found that between any stimulus and our response lies a space of freedom. And in that space lies our power to choose our response regardless of how dark the emotional landscape might be. This wasn't just philosophical insight. It was lived truth discovered while experiencing the depths of despair, grief, fear, and hopelessness. His work proved that even in the most extreme emotional states, when anxiety, depression, rage, or despair feel absolutely overwhelming, this choice point still exists. The intensity of the emotion doesn't eliminate the pause. It just makes it harder to access until you know where to look for it. Dr. Daniel Siegel's revolutionary neuroscience research has shown us exactly what happens in your brain during emotional moments. And his findings are incredibly hopeful. He discovered that your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and conscious decision, has the biological capacity to override automatic reactions from your limbic system. No matter which emotion you're experiencing, whether you're caught in the grip of anxiety before a presentation, drowning in sadness after a loss, burning with anger during a conflict, or paralyzed by guilt over a mistake, your prefrontal cortex can step in and offer you conscious choice options. This isn't about suppressing or bypassing emotions. It's about recognizing that even while you're feeling them fully, you still retain access to your higher brain functions. Siegel's work proves that the feeling of being hijacked by emotions is actually just a lack of awareness about your brain's built-in capacity for conscious response selection. Dr. Rick Hansen's neuroscience research focuses on something equally exciting: the brain's ability to literally rewire itself based on the choices you make in emotional moments. Every time you consciously choose a different response to anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, or fear, you're not just changing that single moment. You're actually creating new neural pathways that make conscious choice easier next time. His work reveals that your brain is constantly adapting and evolving based on which responses you practice most frequently. When you repeatedly choose conscious responses over automatic reactions, regardless of which emotion triggered you, you're literally sculpting your brain to default toward choice rather than reactivity. This process, called neuroplasticity, means that your current emotional patterns aren't permanent features of who you are. They're simply well-traveled neural highways that can be redirected through conscious practice. The science of neuroplasticity reveals something profound about your capacity to change automatic emotional patterns. Your brain doesn't distinguish between easy emotions and difficult ones when it comes to building new response pathways. Whether you're working with mild irritation or intense rage, gentle sadness or deep depression, light worry, or paralyzing anxiety, the same neuroplasticity principles apply. Every conscious choice you make creates a slightly stronger neural pathway toward that response, while every automatic reaction reinforces the old pattern. This means that transformation isn't about perfection. It's about gradually tilting the balance toward conscious choice through consistent practice, one emotional moment at a time. The brain science behind conscious choice activation reveals that this capacity isn't reserved for people with special training or natural emotional intelligence. Your prefrontal cortex is always online and available, even during intense emotional states. The key is learning how to activate it quickly and effectively when emotions are running high. Think of it like having a wise friend living inside your head who always knows the most helpful response to any situation, but who sometimes gets drowned out by the noise of emotional intensity. The more you practice accessing this inner wisdom during challenging moments, the stronger and more accessible it becomes. Here's a powerful technique that works for every emotion. When you feel any intense feeling rising, sadness, anxiety, anger, guilt, disappointment, place your hand on your forehead and take a deep breath. This physical gesture literally activates your prefrontal cortex and gives you instant access to conscious choice for any emotional state. It works in seconds. Now that you know the science proves you have this power over all emotions, here's exactly how to use it in your daily life. I'm about to share the secret protocol that can transform any emotional reaction in just 21 days. Warning: once you start using this, you can't go back to being a victim of your emotions. This isn't about perfection or never feeling challenging emotions again. It's about developing the gentle skill of conscious response that works with every feeling that moves through your system. Think of this protocol like learning to dance with your emotions rather than being knocked over by them. Each step builds upon the previous one, creating a foundation of choice that becomes stronger and more natural with practice. The morning response intention practice sets the energetic tone for your entire day, creating a field of conscious awareness that makes choice points more accessible when emotions evoke. Before you reach for your phone or jump into your to-do list, take just 3 minutes to connect with your intention to respond consciously to whatever emotions surface throughout the day. This isn't about forcing positivity or suppressing difficult feelings. It's about gently reminding your nervous system that you have options beyond automatic reactions. You might say something like, "Today, I welcome all emotions as information and choose responses that serve my highest good." When you set this intention while your mind is still quiet and receptive, you're essentially programming your Awareness to notice choice points as they appear. Whether anxiety arises during a challenging conversation, sadness surfaces from an unexpected memory, or anger flares from a frustrating situation you're mourning. Intention creates a subtle background. Awareness that whispers, remember, you have choices here. The pause power practice is where the magic of real-time transformation happens. And it works with any emotional intensity you might experience. The moment you notice any feeling beginning to rise, whether it's the flutter of anxiety in your chest, the heaviness of sadness in your heart, or the heat of anger in your throat, you have a window of opportunity to activate conscious choice. Take one conscious breath and mentally say the word pause. This simple act interrupts the automatic pathway from trigger to reaction and gives your prefrontal cortex time to come online. In that pause, you're not trying to change the emotion or make it go away. You're simply creating space to respond rather than react. Think of it like stepping back from a painting to see the whole picture, instead of getting lost in one brush stroke. The emotion is still there, still valid, still giving you information, but now you have perspective and options for how to work with it consciously. Response upgrade. Moments are opportunities to practice choosing evolved responses over the automatic patterns that have been running your emotional life. When you find yourself in that sacred pause, gently ask yourself, what would love choose here, or what response would serve everyone involved, including me? These questions aren't about bypassing your authentic feelings. They're about accessing the wisdom that exists beyond your first reactive impulse. If you're feeling anxious about a presentation, an upgraded response might be to prepare thoroughly while also trusting your capabilities. If sadness arises from a disappointment, you might choose to honor the feeling while also looking for the growth opportunity it contains. If anger surfaces from feeling unheard, you might choose to communicate your needs clearly rather than attacking or withdrawing. Each time you select a conscious response over an automatic reaction, you're literally rewiring your brain to default toward wisdom rather than reactivity. The evening choice review is a gentle practice of celebrating your growth and learning from your experiences without judgment or self-criticism. Before sleep, reflect on moments throughout the day when you noticed emotions arising and ask yourself, where did I choose consciously today? Celebrate even the smallest victories. Noticing a choice point counts as success, even if you chose the old pattern. Then gently review moments when you reacted automatically and ask, what might I choose differently next time? This isn't about creating shame or self-judgment. It's about building your awareness and strengthening your choice muscle. Over time, this evening practice helps you recognize patterns and celebrate progress, creating a positive feedback loop that makes conscious choice feel rewarding rather than effortful. The Sacred choice response transforms every emotional trigger into an opportunity for evolution and conscious creation. When you begin to see challenging emotions not as problems to be fixed, but as invitations to practice conscious choice, your entire relationship with your emotional life shifts. Each trigger becomes a sacred moment where you get to choose who you're becoming. That anxiety before a big decision, it's an opportunity to practice trust and courage. The sadness from a loss, it's a chance to practice allowing and love. The anger from injustice, it's an invitation to practice clear communication and healthy boundaries. This perspective doesn't minimize the reality of difficult emotions. It honors them as gateways to growth and conscious evolution. Here's your implementation gift. Start with just the morning response intention. Tomorrow, when you wake up, before checking your phone, simply say, "Today, I choose conscious responses to all my emotions that create the reality I desire." This one practice alone will make you notice choice points with anxiety, sadness, anger, and every other feeling you've been reacting to automatically. When you practice this protocol consistently with all your emotions, something extraordinary starts happening to your nervous system. You begin to develop what I call the choice master state, where conscious response becomes your natural default. This is the advanced state where you automatically pause and consciously choose your response to every emotional situation. And it represents a fundamental shift in how your nervous system operates in the world. When you develop the choice master state, you embody a unique set of characteristics that distinguish you from those still operating on emotional autopilot. You carry a quality of calm presence that remains steady regardless of external circumstances or internal emotional weather. People notice there's something different about your energy. You're responsive rather than reactive, curious rather than defensive, and grounded rather than scattered. You naturally create space between yourself and your emotions, not by disconnecting from them, but by maintaining awareness that you are the observer of your feelings rather than being consumed by them. Your emotional reactions become information rather than directives, signals to pay attention to rather than commands to obey. This doesn't mean you become emotionally flat or disconnected. Instead, you develop the capacity to feel deeply while maintaining choice about how you respond to what you feeling. The automatic pausing that characterizes this state becomes as natural as breathing, occurring effortlessly whenever emotions begin to rise. When anxiety starts to flutter in your chest, your system automatically creates a micro pause without you having to remember or force it. When sadness washes through your heart, you naturally step back internally to witness it, rather than drowning in it. When anger begins to burn in your throat, you instinctively create space to choose your response rather than exploding reactively. This isn't suppression or emotional bypassing. It's conscious choice happening so fluidly that it feels automatic. Your nervous system has been retrained to default toward choice rather than reaction, creating a buffer of awareness between stimulus and response that operates without conscious effort. Fear no longer hijacks your decision-making. Guilt no longer paralyzes your action. And frustration no longer derails your peace. In the choice master state, everything becomes choice responsive rather than trigger reactive, which means you experience a profound sense of personal power and creative freedom. Situations that used to knock you off balance now become opportunities to practice conscious creation. Difficult conversations become chances to choose love over fear. Unexpected challenges become invitations to choose trust over anxiety. Disappointments become opportunities to choose resilience over despair. This doesn't mean you never feel challenging emotions. It means you've developed the skill to work with them consciously rather than being worked over by them. You realize that your emotional responses are actually choice points for creating your reality, and each moment becomes an opportunity to select the experience you want to have. The shift from being a victim of emotional overwhelm to becoming a conscious emotional author represents one of the most liberating transformations possible in human experience. Instead of feeling like your emotions happen to you, you begin to understand that you happen to your emotions through the choices you make in response to them. Anxiety no longer controls your decisions. You choose how to work with anxious energy. Depression no longer defines your reality. You choose how to respond to depressive thoughts and feelings. Anger no longer drives your behavior. You choose how to channel angry energy constructively. This shift doesn't eliminate challenging emotions, but it eliminates the sense of powerlessness that makes them so overwhelming. You develop what feels like emotional immunity, not because you don't feel things deeply, but because you no longer lose yourself in whatever you're feeling. This state grants you unlimited power to create new experiences from any emotional starting point because you're no longer limited by the belief that certain emotions must lead to certain outcomes. Sadness no longer has to mean withdrawal and isolation. It can become an opening to deeper compassion and connection. Fear no longer has to mean paralysis and avoidance. It can become fuel for courage and growth. Anger no longer has to mean destruction and regret. It can become the energy for healthy boundaries and positive change. Every emotion becomes raw material for conscious creation rather than an automatic program that runs your life. The difference between managing emotions and transcending automatic emotional reactions represents a quantum leap in consciousness and practical power. Managing emotions often feels like damage control, trying to minimize the Impact after the reaction has already begun. Transcending automatic reactions means you're operating from a completely different level of awareness where conscious choice is your starting point, rather than an afterthought. You're not trying to control your emotions. You're choosing your responses from a place of inner freedom and wisdom. Here's your mastery indicator. You'll know you entering the choice master state when you start feeling genuinely curious about situations that used to trigger anxiety, sadness, anger, or guilt. Instead of getting overwhelmed, you'll find yourself thinking, "That's interesting. What is this emotion trying to teach me?" This curiosity works for every emotion and is your sign that you've shifted into conscious response mode. But here's what blew my mind about reaching this state. It doesn't just change your internal experience. It fundamentally transforms how the external world responds to you. Your external reality can only reflect the quality of responses you consistently choose in challenging emotional moments. And this principle operates with mathematical precision regardless of which emotions you're working with. The quantum field functions like an incredibly sophisticated mirror that reflects back the energetic signature of your responses rather than the intensity of your emotions themselves. When you respond to anxiety with conscious breathing and trust, the field registers and reflects that calm, centered energy back to you through synchronicities, supportive people, and flowing circumstances. When you react to anxiety with panic and resistance, the field mirrors that chaotic energy through stressful situations, difficult people, and blocked opportunities. The same principle applies to every emotion across the spectrum. Conscious responses to sadness, such as allowing the feeling while choosing self-compassion, create space for healing, support, and deeper connections to emerge in your life. Reactive responses to sadness, such as isolating and spiraling into victim stories, generate more experiences of abandonment and disconnection. The field doesn't judge your choices. It simply reflects the energetic quality of whatever response you're broadcasting. Most consistently, your external circumstances transform when your emotional response patterns shift because reality is fundamentally responsive to consciousness rather than circumstances. Most people have this backwards. They think external changes will shift their internal experience. But quantum physics reveals the opposite is true. When you consistently choose conscious responses to frustration instead of explosive reactions, your work environment becomes more harmonious. When you select curious responses to fear instead of paralyzed reactions, new opportunities naturally appear. When you choose loving responses to guilt instead of self-punishment reactions, your relationships become more supportive and understanding. This isn't wishful thinking or positive psychology. It's the practical Application of quantum field dynamics. Your emotional response patterns are literally the creative force that shapes your external experience, because consciousness is the fundamental building block of reality. The scientific principle behind this phenomenon reveals that consciousness creates reality through choice points, and every emotion offers you a moment of creative power. Quantum physics has shown us that reality exists in potential until consciousness collapses it into experience through the act of observation. But here's the key insight. It's not just what you observe that matters. It's the quality of consciousness you bring to the observation. When you observe a challenging situation from a state of conscious choice rather than automatic reaction, you literally collapse a different reality than when you observe from victimhood or reactivity. Every emotional moment becomes a quantum choice point where you're selecting which version of reality gets to manifest. The anxiety-inducing email can collapse into either a stressful experience or an opportunity for growth, depending on the quality of consciousness you bring to it. The field is infinitely responsive to these moment-by-moment choices. Conscious responses to different emotions create dramatically different external experiences through the law of energetic resonance. When you respond to anxiety with grounded presence, you naturally attract calm, stable situations and people who help you feel secure. When you respond to sadness with gentle acceptance and self-care, you magnetize compassionate support and healing opportunities. When you respond to anger with clear boundaries and constructive communication, you create relationships built on mutual respect and understanding. When you respond to guilt with self-forgiveness and learning, you draw in experiences that help you grow and evolve. Each emotion, when met with conscious choice, becomes a creative force that generates experiences aligned with your highest good rather than your deepest fears. You are never powerless to any emotion, because every single moment offers you infinite response options. And this truth becomes more obvious the more you practice conscious choice. Even in your most challenging emotional moments, when anxiety feels overwhelming or sadness feels crushing, you still retain access to choice. You can choose to breathe consciously. You can choose to soften your body. You can choose to speak kindly to yourself. You can choose to reach out for support. You can choose to trust that this feeling will pass. These might seem like small choices, but in quantum terms, each one sends a ripple through the field that begins shifting your reality immediately. The intensity of the emotion doesn't eliminate your power to choose. It just requires more awareness and intention to access that power. The mechanism of reality creation through emotional response selection operates through what quantum scientists call the observer effect, where your consciousness literally participates in creating what you experience. Every time you choose a conscious Response over an automatic reaction. You're not just changing that moment. You're changing the trajectory of your entire timeline. You're selecting which version of yourself and which version of reality gets to continue unfolding. Your emotional responses are actually reality creation choices disguised as reactions. When you begin to see them this way, every challenging emotion becomes an opportunity to consciously author your experience rather than unconsciously repeat old patterns. Here's your quantum reality test. 4. The next 24 hours, respond to every emotional challenge, whether anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, or fear, with either curiosity or gratitude. Watch how dramatically your external circumstances shift when you consistently choose these elevated responses to all emotions. This is your proof that you're literally authoring your reality through your emotional choices. This brings us to the ultimate realization that will transform how you see your entire emotional life and your creative power in this universe. The ultimate realization is that you are the conscious chooser of your responses to all emotions, not a victim of anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, or any other feeling. When you master choice point awareness across your full emotional spectrum, you gain the power to create entirely new life experiences through the responses you select to every emotional state. You're not just reacting to emotions. You're consciously authoring your reality, one emotional choice at a time. This understanding represents a fundamental shift from seeing emotions as things that happen to you to recognizing them as creative opportunities that you get to work with consciously. Every feeling that moves through your system becomes raw material for conscious reality creation rather than an automatic program that runs your life. The sacred pause between trigger and response isn't just a moment of choice. It's a quantum field of infinite possibilities where you get to select which version of yourself and which version of your reality gets to continue unfolding. The observer effect that we've explored reveals that you are never separate from the reality you experiencing. You are actively participating in its creation through the quality of consciousness you bring to each emotional moment. When you consistently choose conscious responses over automatic reactions, you're not just managing your emotions better. You're literally shifting timelines and collapsing different potential realities into your lived experience. This emotional choice point mastery is the foundation for all conscious reality creation, serving as the bedrock for every other manifestation and transformation practice you might explore. Without the ability to choose your responses to challenging emotions, other consciousness work becomes like trying to build a house on shifting sand. But when you develop this core capacity, every other aspect of conscious living becomes exponentially more powerful and accessible. The ripple effects of this mastery extend far beyond your personal emotional experience. As you become someone who responds consciously rather than reacts. Automatically, you naturally become a source of calm and wisdom for others. Your relationships deepen, your work becomes more fulfilling, and your overall sense of personal power and creative freedom expands in ways that feel almost magical, but are actually the natural result of aligned consciousness. If you found this powerful and want to go even deeper, make sure you watch my previous video where I showed you the shadow recognition gateway techniques for mastering jealousy, vindictive thoughts, and other dark impulses to build unshakable character. Start practicing the sacred pause with every emotion today and watch how your entire reality transforms through the power of conscious emotional choice. And because you watched until the end, here's your ultimate emotional choice point mantra. I pause, I choose, I create. Repeat this whenever you feel any intense emotion, anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, fear. These 6 words will become your gateway to conscious reality creation through emotional mastery.